welcome to the Effortless Swimming Podcast. My guest today is Ryan Twist from Bayswater Ankle and Foot Clinic. Ryan, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, mate. It's been too long since we've caught up.
Yeah, so we've done a bit of work together in terms of swimming coaching, and your background in sport is triathlon and in particular Ironman, as you can see with a lot of stuff behind you as well, with all of those races. And you're a podiatrist, and I thought it'd be great to get you on the podcast today because with all the lockdowns and all of that, and I'm a prime example of it, is you've seen a lot of foot, ankle, leg injuries as a result of it. So for anyone who's listening who wants to get into running, or they've been running and they have found themselves injured, like I have, this podcast is for you. So what have you seen the last couple of months since pools are closed and all that sort of thing?
Well, it's been a really interesting trend, and something that has definitely started to come through is people starting to pick up more walking and running. Because if we think about it, all the pools are shut. Well, for most people around the place, pools are shut. There's no organised sport. There's no gyms, and there's no other real way of exercising. A lot of places have a radius limit, like in Melbourne, we can't go more than 5Ks from our home. So that rules out, cycling and a lot of other things as well. So people are taking up walking and running, and generally people who are fit and active and got a pretty good level of fitness and competitiveness are going in at all guns blazing, and getting injured as a result of that.
Guilty as charged. The first lockdown, in the first week I went for a run, and I was going to do it was going to be 15 seconds sprint, 15 seconds walk, and I was going to do it for 10 minutes. Sure. And I thought, geez, I'm feeling pretty good. I might just do that for 30 minutes. And what do you know? In 2 days, I couldn't run anymore, and that took me out for 6 weeks. And then the second one, I was just, because I couldn't swim and I couldn't travel down to the bay. I did 97.5 Ks in a week, so nearly 100K week, which is more than what I did when I was training for Ironman. Just because I was bored and I needed something to do. And then I was out for 2 weeks because my ankle flared up again. And I wasn't surprised. I knew it was going to happen, but it was one of those things where I had to just exercise. So what sort of injuries are you seeing? And what's most common at the moment for people?
Well, right now, the two most common things are either soft tissue tendon injury, so Achilles tendinopathy, a couple of other tendons in the foot which commonly get injured, or like the classic plantar fascia, which is sort of bottom of the heel pain. And then the other sort of injury we're seeing at the moment is a lot of bone stress injuries, where bones are getting stressed too much too soon, and they develop some swelling and inflammation within the actual bones, and that can be a real problem. And we're seeing a lot of that at the moment. Swimmers are especially guilty of this. In non-pandemic world, we certainly see this a lot as well in swimmers as a subset. So it's interesting now. Yeah. So generally, swimmers, if they're looking to transition to triathlon, or they want to pick up some running, train for an Ironman or a marathon, or they want to change or introduce more cross training to their training or whatever, we tend to find swimmers do pick up a lot of lower limb injuries. So I'm talking sort of below the knee. So foot, ankle, shins, calves, things like that. And the reason why I think it is because, first of all, as we touched on, swimmers are very competitive. They're generally sort of quite high achieving in an endurance sport. They're fit, they're strong, and they've got good aerobic base, because we know how good swimming is at building that aerobic base. So they could, aerobically and psychologically, they can sort of run. They can run for many Ks. But the years of that non-weight bearing conditioning you get from running, so the lack of that through swimming, is certainly a problem that we see a lot in swimmers, because of all those reasons why they're fit and strong and healthy, and they go out and run. They're not conditioned to run, so they develop overuse injuries very, very quickly, and it's very common to see.
And what do you, let's say someone hasn't started running yet, or they're looking to start. What do you recommend to those people? Obviously, don't do 60 Ks in your first week. What sort of things help avoid those sort of injuries?
Okay, so the best thing that especially swimmers or anyone can do is is get a strength and rehab sort of program started where they're focusing in on specific areas of the lower limb and foot to improve the strength of the muscles, of the joints, of the collagen, of the ligaments, soft tissue, everything. At the same time, start running very, very, lightly. We want to start at a very small base and progressively build. And so generally what we recommend for swimmers to start running would be a few weeks of a walk run training program where they go out for like a run where it's say 30 minutes, but you're walking for 3 minutes, jogging for 2 minutes, walk for 3 minutes, jog for 2 minutes. So it's a walk run cycle. And if you do that consistently a few times a week for a few weeks, at the same time, you're doing a lot of strength and conditioning to build up that strength in your lower legs. That's the best way, rather than going in and diving in head first, pardon the pun, to running. That's going to help protect against these bone stress injuries and this plantar heel pain and tendinopathies that we see a lot of. Yeah.
What are some of the most common strengthening exercises that you'll give that sort of cover most of your bases?
Look, I am a huge fan of developing calf strength. We know through lots of studies and anecdotal evidence that when runners have strong calf muscles, the chance of an overuse injury significantly decreases. And so the calf muscle is made up of 4 muscles. And if we focus on strengthening the soleus, which is the biggest one in that calf muscle complex, that can go a long way to helping to protect against a lot of overuse injuries. So strengthening the calves is super important. And then I'm also a big fan of strengthening a couple of muscles located within the arch of our feet. They help to control a lot of motion as your foot strikes the ground and responsible for a lot of propulsion. So a muscle like tibialis posterior and another complex muscle located within the actual foot, that they're really good things to try and focus on.
Yeah, right. A friend of mine, he had an issue with his calf for it was like 3 years or something, and he just couldn't run for a very long time. And he went in to see like one of the top 3 experts in Australia, and you basically have to have been injured for at least 3 years or something to be able to go and see this lady. And I remember him telling me that he went in and it was her and like her trainee apprentice person as well, and they turned him around and they had a look at his calves and they basically paid his calves out for a few minutes at least, picking him apart, and then she gave him this really heavy sort of calf strengthening program, right. And he's good to go, like he's ready to run now. But essentially it came down to calf strength and obviously just easing back into it.
Apart from being a bruised ego, I'm sure he's super grateful now.
Absolutely,
yeah. It's and the reason why is because the calf muscles they absorb so much load as we strike the ground, and they are responsible for a lot of propulsion forwards. Early in my career, I was very fortunate enough to work alongside a podiatrist that was involved at the Australian Institute of Sport. And at the AIS, they've got a lot of benchmarks that athletes have to meet, certain strength in certain muscle groups and certain range of motion in certain joints. And for the calves, it was all weight-bearing athletes had to clear 25 single leg calf raises on each side with the right technique. That's the gold standard. It might have changed. This was 10 years ago now, but it might have changed since then. But that's sort of a good benchmark to aim for. If you can achieve 25 single leg calf raises on each side, again, with the right technique, it makes a massive difference.
What do you see? Because listening to that, you think, it doesn't sound that hard, but I think I've sort of done a little bit of it before, and 12, 13, 14 reps in, start to feel it. And I'm guessing the form probably breaks down then.
Big time. Yeah. And then you start compensating. A lot of people will start to say, bend their knee, which engages the hamstrings and the glutes, which can assist in it. And then and the pelvis anteriorly rotates. And so you're sort of rotating outwards through your hips. And so you're engaging all these different muscles and joints rather than actually using the calf muscles to engage the movement. So very few, even high level and even elite level athletes struggle to do 25 single leg calf raises each side. So it's a good thing to aim towards. And if you're commencing running, it's even more important. Yeah.
What about shoes? What kind of impact do they have, having the right kind of shoes?
Yeah, everything. As a podiatrist, I've been practicing nearly 13 years. I would say the number one risk factor for injury, there are lots. The number one risk factor for injury is footwear, and the wrong shoes can cause injuries so quickly. And so it's really important to get the right kind of shoe. And it's probably the number one question we get asked is, what shoe do you recommend? And my answer is there isn't one. It depends on your foot type. It depends on your level of ability. It depends on your injury history. It depends on, what surface you're running on most of the time. There's so many factors at play. The best advice I can give, there's two bits of advice. One is that you have multiple pairs of shoes. Studies have shown that if you have more than one pair of shoe, it will decrease your chance of an overuse injury. And then the second thing is that you invest in some time and some money and going to a proper footwear shop where they do a full fitting service, where they'll take a look at everything, take it all into consideration, and then find the right type of shoe for you. So they're the two best bits of advice I can give regarding footwear.
Couple of questions there. The first one is, so a couple of different pairs of shoes, like of the same kind, or for if you're running on, say, the road or trails, like what do you mean by a few different pairs?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So that a mix of that. So it's good to have, say, a pair of trail shoes, then say the Sunday long run built up more sort of cushioned shoe, and then maybe a faster, flatter pair for your track sessions or speed sessions, and then maybe another shoe for your 20-minute easy run. Having all those kinds of different types of shoes for the different type of running you're doing is the best way to go about that. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Because the reason I asked about the shoes is I had a pair of New Balance shoes, no idea what they were, but I bought 3 of the same kind. There was one pair that I wore through, they were great. And then the second lot of that same style, the left shoe, just for whatever reason, it didn't sit the same. And so I developed a bit of an injury from using those. And so I went on to the third pair, and then the right one I sort of had a similar issue with the fit. Like they weren't exactly the same, just because of I think not the sole of the shoe, but the little insert in it felt just a little bit off, and that just impacted how I was landing. So, and it was all down to the shoes. So I've got rid of those and got some new trail shoes, and they are great for on the trails, but on the road they just they're not that great. So I need to get another pair of shoes for the road, basically.
And if you stick to the same basic principle of how that trail shoe feels for your trail, if you sort of, because trail shoes and running shoes have got pretty similar technology. If you stick to that basic principle of what works in the trail to the road, it'll help a lot. Yeah. Gotcha.
And then in terms of seeing someone, so I know they've got the athlete's foot, but they have their sort of basic fit and that kind of thing. And then do you see podiatrists about that stuff as well? Do you guys do that, or it's more you go into like a shop like that? Because I've heard reviews on those, just, the foot shop, and you probably, that smile sort of says it all, but so that's something that you guys do.
Yeah, definitely. And look, those, like the athlete's foot does largely a good job, but the commercial reality is they've got budgets to fit, and a lot of the time they're kids serving them, and so there can be holes in that system. As podiatrists, we can certainly guide people down the right sort of path, but until someone actually tries that shoe on their foot, they're not going to know exactly. So in these days there are good sort of specialty running shoe shops that are opening up. People recognize gaps in the market, so the Running Company is a super good footwear shop if you're in Australia, but there are certainly lots of others popping up around the place, and they're really good. It's worth the time and money to go to places like that if you're pretty serious about your running.
Yeah, definitely. And I think even just in my last 6 months, I look at it, and let's say a pair of shoes costs you $200. Well, I think if it's going to sit me out for 6 weeks because I can't run because I've injured myself, it's like I would much rather spend $500 on a pair of shoes and still be able to train for 6 weeks.
100%. And I'm sure you'd rather spend it on the shoes than coming to see a podiatrist. So,
well, true. Yeah, you're going to spend it one way or the other.
Exactly.
And if someone is they're feeling a few niggles here and there, like how do you know when's the right time to, when to stop? Should you just stop completely? Obviously, going to see someone about the injury is a great idea, but do you need to stop for a number of weeks, or can you continue to train a bit lighter? What's the sort of standard that you see there?
Look, it's a really, really good question, and it's depends on the type of injury that you've got. So if we look at a bone stress injury, bone stress injury is when there's swelling and inflammation within a bone, and that can be a little bit all the way to a stress fracture. So anything along that sort of paradigm. If it's a bone stress injury, then it ideally no weight bearing, no running at all, because if you continue to stress the bone, it's going to get worse and worse and eventually crack. So that's where swimmers are all right to deal with in that sort of injury, because they'll go and swim. If you tell a pure runner to swim, they can't swim and they hate it. So that's all right for swimmers. But for a soft tissue injury, say we're talking like a tendon or a muscle or a ligament, they like to have a certain amount of load put through them in order for them to recover and repair. Complete rest for a tendon, for example, is quite bad. But knowing where and how much load to put through that damaged structure is really hard to determine. And that's where I guess that, a physio or a podiatrist or an osteo, whoever can help guide people on that. Because if you do too much on an injured tendon, then it will flare up and it will get worse. If you do too little to an injured tendon, it may not repair and regenerate. It might drag on. So finding where that load level is and then staying around that load is super important. In terms of when to pull back or get advice on, and you have a bit of a niggle, it's a really difficult thing to try and to explain to people. But as a general rule, what I like to say is that if your pain level, and this is very subjective, I'll start by saying this is subjective, so it has a lot of flaws, but if your pain level is about a 7 out of 10 or less, generally it's okay. When it gets to about an 8 out of 10 or more, then generally you need to see someone. So, if we go out and train and we're going for a run, we've got a little bit of a niggle. That little bit of a niggle, for you and me might be a bit different. It's hard to know exactly, but if you think of that number 7 out of 10 or less, then it's generally going to be okay. But a bit more than that, you need to see someone. Yeah. But again, I understand, I appreciate how subjective that is, and everyone's 7 is going to be different. So it's really, really difficult. But the best advice is if you're unsure, it's best to be seen earlier than later.
And what about in terms of volume of running or how many times a week? I mean, I'm just thinking of one friend in particular who hates running. And
don't we all?
I'd say in the last probably 10 years since I've known him, he would just always refuse. He would never run. He'd always sort of talk about how much he hated running because he's a swimmer. And now he's been running 3 times a week, between 3 and 5 Ks, really. So pretty light. He's not injured or anything. What sort of volume would you look for people to sort of limit it to if they're coming purely from a swimming background and they've started running in the last 6 months? And I know everyone's different, obviously, but what sort of things are you seeing causing those injuries? Like, what sort of volume are those people doing?
Yeah, the injury, if someone gets injured, generally they've done too much too soon. So they've made too much of a jump in too much of a short period of time. In terms of the type of volume, it depends on the base that athlete or that person's got. And some people can deal with, a huge jump in their training, and generally they'll be okay. But as a general rule, many years ago, we heard this 10% rule where you should increase your volume by 10% each week. For someone who's pretty fit and pretty strong and towards sort of a pretty good level of ability, you can generally increase by about 20%. Again, that will decrease if your volume's massive. So say you're running 120K a week, it's not a good idea to increase that by 20%. But for those pretty good level athletes, you can, if you stay somewhere between 10 and 20% increase each week or each month, that's a pretty safe sort of window. If you're coming back from an injury or you're starting from the bottom, if you're a swimmer who wants to just get into running, then it's best to keep it under 10% increase per week or month.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, that's
I hope
good.
that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that was kind of going to be the next question. How much each week should you generally increase by? And one of the things that I found quite helpful as I've been running the last few months is I've been doing lots of sort of slow, easy Ks.
Great.
Just because I've sort of been out in the forest and near the mountain that's sort of near my house and just exploring around there. And so it's some really steep grading. So I've just been walking the uphills and just kind of cruising for the most part. And I haven't done many efforts. And I found that's made a big difference with just being able to do a bit more distance than I would normally do. Is like I'm running some pretty slow Ks there compared to what I'd normally do. Like a slow K would be like, if I'm running just easy, it might be say 5-minute Ks or 5:15. But some of these have been much slower, and I've been able to keep pretty good distance throughout since then. And what do you ever sort of talk about pace and speed and that kind of thing? Because the first time that we went into lockdown, it was because I did too much sprinting off the bat, and that caused me to get injured. So now I've just gone too far in the other direction. I think just all easy Ks.
Yeah, I'm a huge advocate of this from an aerobic benefit scheme, but also if we look at injury prevention scheme as well. So what we do know is that if you're running easy and running slow, like what you just mentioned there, generally your heart rate's going to be a bit lower, and you'll be in that sort of zone 1, zone 2 area. And we know that when you're training in that zone, your body's producing certain hormones and certain enzymes and chemicals which aid in aerobic fitness, but also decrease the overall toll on the body, so you recover a little bit quicker. Once we get into those zone 4 and 5 heart rates, we're producing different hormones, different enzymes, different chemicals. It's a bigger toll on the body. It takes longer to recover, and it's much more demanding on the system as a whole. And so if we're constantly in that zone 4 and 5 heart rate, our body's going to fatigue much more easily, and it's going to more likely develop an injury as a result of that. Whereas most of our training is done in that zone 1, zone 2 area, with that top up in that zone 4 and 5 area, then that's the best way to, first of all, get fitter, but second of all, prevent injuries from occurring, because those hormones and enzymes and chemicals that are being produced in those lower zones, I'm talking, the physiological reactions, but also a cellular reaction in the muscles and the tendons and the bones. They're getting much fitter and stronger much quicker in those zones, and recovering much quicker as well. Yeah. So I'm a huge advocate of running slow to run fast. Yeah. It really makes a big difference. And I speak a lot with my athletes, my patients who come in, who, I'll often look at their training program, and I'll never write a training program for them, because generally they'll have a coach, but I'll, have a word to their coach and make slight adjustments and tweaks and recommendations based around that sort of theory, because it's so important. It makes a massive difference.
Yeah. And as you were saying before, I mean, well, swimmers are a competitive bunch, triathletes are a competitive bunch. Yeah. And I know personally, like most of the time I just want to get in there and go for it. And it's hard to hold yourself back.
Definitely. As a male, a young male as well, that can also be a thing. I'm guilty of that myself. Yeah. But swimmers, especially if they're a good swimmer, they're used to being in that fast lane, and they're leading out that hundreds, and they're smashing out those sets, and they swim faster than most others, and they swim better than most others, and swim more often than most others. So when they start running, they're right at the bottom, when they're used to being at that top end of their sport. Now all of a sudden, in a sport that's relatively similar, they're so far down, they try to work extra hard to get to that level that they're used to being. So dealing with swimmers can be tricky because of that. Yeah.
One of the things I've really enjoyed is I guess 6 months ago, for those easy runs, I've just been practicing nasal breathing. So only breathing in and out through the nose, close your mouth. And if I do get to that point where I'm going too fast, where I've got to breathe through my mouth, I'll just back off the pace. And I've been doing all of my easy runs with that. And it's at the start, the first 2 weeks, it was really challenging, even to go at an easy pace. But after that, it's just, man, it made a difference. And when we got back in the pool, in that sort of that middle section, when I was able to sort of swim again,
Yep.
I was pulling out some really good times in the water because aerobically I was really fit. And I think that nasal breathing made a big difference, or it helped me at least maintain that when I wasn't swimming. I was only running. Have you sort of experimented with that much, or have you looked into that much at all?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that breathing pattern. It makes a big difference, and especially for swimmers, I find it helps. From a personal perspective, I'm done the same, and I found the same as well when we could swim there for what was it, a month or so. I felt like when I hopped back in the water, I was actually breathing much more efficiently and much more easier because of exactly what you just said. Yeah.
Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you think is important to bring up for those that are starting to run a bit more?
Just be wary that, yeah, if you are a swimmer and you're a high level swimmer, just be wary that your bones and your muscles just aren't quite conditioned for the running. Yes, aerobically you're right up there, and you're probably better than some of the good runners, but from a cellular level, with what occurs when your foot and leg impacts on the ground, the damage that occurs to those bone cells and those muscle fibers, it's going to take a harder toll on your body than that well-conditioned runner. So you just need to be patient. You need to grow into it slowly, do that strength and conditioning at the same time you're doing that walk-run program for a few weeks before progressively building. And you'll get there so much quicker than someone who goes in too hard too soon, or has no background in swimming or running. You'll really accelerate if you follow that general advice. I hope that makes sense. Does it sound clear?
Yeah.
Great.
And one other thing that just came to mind there is I haven't asked about mobility. What sort of importance does that play for avoiding those injuries as well? And what kind of things?
Massive.
Yeah. What kind of tightness wear and what sort of stretches you're giving to people?
Yeah, look, that's really, really important. There's 26 bones and 31 joints in each foot. So there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of bones, a lot of joints. And so they can seize up and become very tight. And if one becomes tight, the rest sort of go out in unison with it. So stretching the calves and ankle range of motion, toe range of motion movements, and regular massage is really, really important. It can help a lot. But as podiatrists, well, myself, I'm trained in, mobilization and manipulation of joints of the feet, and that can make a massive difference as well. So if anyone's listening out there and they've got really tight calves or really tight ankle or really tight arch, there's no necessary injury or pain, but they're super tight in any of those areas, see a podiatrist who's qualified in that mobilization and manipulation and some soft tissue work, and it can make a massive difference in your comfort levels, but also preventing an injury.
Awesome. And for those that are listening, you're obviously based in Melbourne. Where can people find out more about where you guys are and how you can help?
Sure. So people can look up my personal pages, Facebook and Instagram, or on work. Our work pages are also Facebook and Instagram, which is Bayswater Foot and Ankle Clinic. And I love my swimming, I love my water, but Bayswater's not located anywhere near the bay or any water, unfortunately. So I don't know how I got that name, but yeah, Bayswater Foot and Ankle Clinic. And if anyone wants to shoot me a message, or we can even do online appointments to anyone around the world at the moment. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for jumping on. And it's probably partly selfish of me because I've been dealing with some injuries in the last 6 months. But I appreciate that. Yeah. No, I'm back running, so it's all good now.
Good.
And thanks for jumping on the podcast.